And I'll be angry about that because I think it's lazy, really. I think it's lazy, it's desperate, and you can probably see in my tone here. Yeah, I'm not having that at all. That's wide of the mark.
We'll stick with United, but I just want to address a comment from David Reeves, who don't recognise the name. Don't know whether he's a first-time commenter, but he says, you guys are part of the problem. You have not asked them enough questions about the team selection and poor subs and no plan if things are going wrong. It's left to the fans to vent. I mean, I completely disagree with what David's saying here, but we've said time and time again that we know Chris and Joe go to the press conferences. You guys don't ask questions during the broadcast section. You ask, in the print section, and I know you and Joe continuously ask Sean Dyche these questions, and obviously you put it out in your written content. I don't know what more you guys can do, really, in terms of the questions that, certainly when, you're both going and stuff like that. I will disagree with him. It's an easy shot at us at a time when everyone's hurting exactly.
To question the professional integrity. And I'll be angry about that because I think it's lazy, really. I think it's lazy, it's desperate, and you can probably see in my tone here. Yeah, I'm not having that at all. That's wide of the mark. And to be fair to Joe, he's very quick on that. Joe, it is part of the one that you do see after the match, and it was Joe asking them. And Sean Dyche made a comment about where he said that people would try to paint a bit of a narrative that wasn't correct about him. And he replied to one of Joe's questions like that. And then straight away, Joe was back in there defending himself. And then Dyche was on the back foot, to be fair, saying, I didn't mean you specifically. I meant the media in general. So, no, I'm not having that. We're all hurting at the moment. But, I'm not going to take that from somebody coming in saying that. I mean, I had big issues last season. I was after the Chelsea game, the 6-0, and I talked about people needing to give their head a wobble and stuff like that. If they were questioning at the time, I think it was vindicated in that respect afterwards. There was a lot of issues over that one. And someone saying today, before we came on to the podcast, about when you're going to admit you were wrong over Dyche. I mean, that was last season. This is this season. I don't think this season I've ever sort of defended him in that respect or said anything on those grounds. It's all well and good. I mean, like I said, we're all hurting, but it's easy to say, oh, you should say this. You should go up to Sean Dyche and say, this is how it is, Sean. You should be doing this, that and the other. Come on, these are people who've never been in a professional journalist's shoes, and in the same way that, we could all entitled to our opinion, but, it's all well and good being Mr. Big from the sidelines and saying you're going to tell Sean Dyche this is how it is. World doesn't work like that.
Can I just add one example of that? I think a couple of weeks ago, somebody was saying, I can't remember, the press of the Echo should ask why Dyche is not playing NJ at number 10, right, okay? And I think after the press conference before last, Joe questioned Dyche on it in the written bit, not in the broadcast bit, and Joe put a piece out on the Saturday with the balance sheet about why Dyche is not doing it, blah, 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 read yourself. And there was a couple of comments underneath saying, why have you put this out on match day on? It'll only disturb the team. Well, that's what a press conference is for. That's why it's on a Friday for you to as part of your preview to the game. And you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. And I totally agree with Chris. And it's a relationship between a journalist, and I'm not a journalist. Just try and think I'm a journalist. I'm not a journalist, but the relationship between a journalist and the manager is completely different. But there's no relationship between the supporter and the manager, is there, other than like what you say, an emotional relationship, you call it. And you can't go gung-ho, can you, and all the time. This has been going back since journalism and football for 100 years. Is you've always got to be balanced, because actually, what you want is stories, don't you? You've got to have that relationship. You can't just constantly slag a manager off, because ultimately they'll just switch off, quite rightly. And that's always been the issue. And it's a slightly different relationship between national journalists and the national press than the local press as well. And I don't agree with that. And then there's lots of stuff if you go through the Echo archives and just this season, where there's been press and comments made to Dyche, and then that's been reported and discussed afterwards, indeed, on this very podcast. And no, I disagree with that completely.
I think, there's a certain element of influence that journalists can garner, without a doubt, but
I like it.
we've got zero impact of what happens on the pitch. We don't influence Sean Dyche's team selections. If we did, then he needs to be sacked right now, if I'm being completely honest. So I will completely disagree with that comment. We're all frustrated. We're all here to vent. We all want the best for Everton Football Club, and there's always like a list of easy targets to go at. Obviously, the players, the manager, and then when you've had enough at the going of the players and the manager, then you turn to journalists and you turn to podcasts and stuff like that. I just think it's like you said, it's an easy comment. It's a derogatory comment for what we have to do on every single day.
People need to remember, and this is like respecting everybody who watches, and thanks for watching us. This podcast is not a fan podcast.
Yeah.
And you can't mix it. You can't mix it with other great Everton fan podcasts, which I occasionally appear on, and they're all great and stuff. But it's not a fan podcast. It's effectively one for journalists, isn't it? Yeah. That's why we got Chris here today, and that so you're coming from it from a different perspective, and we should remember that. And you've always got to be, we were talking about this the other week, you've always got to be balanced, because guess what? People out there have got different opinions. There's not necessarily the common, the ones that shout loudest, that is and justifiably so at the moment, that doesn't necessarily reflect the opinion of everybody who's listening or watching. But while we're sitting here, we've got to reflect the opinions of everybody. You can't just go in with the 2-footed challenge, can you? I don't think that's fair.
The Royal Blue Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.